بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In last week's lesson we were looking at how Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was raised, how Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was built. And I mentioned how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself and the Sahabas participated in the building and in the raising of Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I also mentioned that Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not like your typical or traditional masjid which just opens for the 5 daily namazes, opens around 15 minutes before Fajr or closes 15 minutes after Fajr or 20 minutes before Dhuhr and 10 minutes after Dhuhr. But instead the Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the center of ta'aleem and education. The Ashab al-Suffah, the 70 Sahabas and companions who dedicated their lives for learning about the Quran and about the Hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were housed inside Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was also the center for spiritual, for internal and outward purification. So it was a center where the Muslims, where the Sahabas were purifying their interior and also purifying themselves outwardly in terms of ta'aleem and in terms of education. Now the first project, as I mentioned last week, which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did when he went to Medina Munawwara was the building of the masjid. Now the next thing which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did when he arrived in Medina Munawwara was to establish what we call in Arabic muwakhat and in Urdu baijargi between the muhajiruns, i.e. those who migrated from Mecca to Medina Munawwara, and the ansars, i.e. the people of Medina Munawwara. So what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did was that he established this kind of brotherhood between the muhajirs and also the people of Medina Munawwara, i.e. the ansars. Now, why did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam think or deem it necessary to establish this kind of brotherhood and connection and link between the muhajirs and between the ansars? Now, let's look at the muhajir, those who migrated from Mecca to Medina Munawwara. Now, many of the Sahabas who migrated from Mecca to Medina Munawwara, they sacrificed everything for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Many of the Sahabas in Mecca, they were very, very rich. They had properties, they had land, they had estates, they had horses, they had camels, they had slaves, they had slave girls. But they gave everything up. It wasn't like they just put their land or their horses in their back pockets and then they migrated to Medina Munawwara. They left everything behind for Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even to the extent that there were many Sahabas, they had to leave behind their loved ones for Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Many Sahabas, they had to leave behind their parents. They weren't Muslims, so they left them behind in Mecca and they came to Medina Munawwara. Some had to leave behind their wives. They weren't Muslims, so they had to leave them behind and come to Medina Munawwara. Some had to leave behind their sons and their daughters. Why? Because they weren't Muslims, so had to leave them behind in Mecca and then come to Medina Munawwara. So they left behind everything, family, wealth, everything for one purpose, and that was to please Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, when we read about it or when we hear about it, we think, oh well, it's something easy, I bet I could do that. But actually think about it. Just imagine we're living here in Birmingham. Just imagine you leave everything behind. Your house, your family, your wife, your children, your parents, and you go to another country. Just say, imagine you go to France. And now when you arrive in France, you have absolutely no penny, no money at all. So you could imagine that at the beginning, you're going to be like living on the streets. You'll be living out in the cold, in the rain, in the snow. and then you may find some work or some job, and then slowly you earn a bit of money to find some accommodation. And it's after many years where when you earn some money, you could then think, okay, you're a bit settled now. But initially you have to undergo a lot of hardship and a lot of difficulty and a lot of pain. So this is what the Sahabas had done. They left behind everything. Any property they had, houses, land, everything left behind. Family they left behind. And they arrived in Medina Munawwara totally skint, totally having nothing with them at all. Only thing they came for was the pleasure of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you can imagine the difficulty and the situation, the traumatic experience the Sahabas and the companions were going through. Now what happens when you are going through any difficulty or any kind of traumatic experience? You need some love and affection. So then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam built that connection between the Muhajirs and the Ansar, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told the Ansar to show love and affection to the Muhajirs, to those who migrated from Makkah to Medina Munawwara, so that they get over this traumatic experience which they had suffered. Now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave the Ansar this responsibility to look after the Muhajirs, to show love to them, to show affection to them. But the way they paid back Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was something which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and even the Muhajiroons could not even imagine. They sometimes, when people, they give you responsibility, they say, Amir, he gives you responsibility, so we do it because of the sake of it. Oh, Amir Saab's going to ask us tomorrow about have we done this or not. So we just go and do a bit of collection or do a bit here and there, and we just, we're able to then answer the Amir Saab. But when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave this responsibility to the Ansar to show love and affection, they fulfilled this order of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to its full. Not only did when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam built that connection with the Muhajir brother, not only did they give them half of the entire wealth. So whatever the Ansari Sahabi had, any land, he said, okay, you could take half of my land. I've got 2 houses, you could take one of the house. I've got 2 camels, you could take 1 camel. I've got 2 horses, you could take 1 horse. So not only did they give to them in terms of the worldly wealth, but they were even willing to sacrifice their own wives to their Muhajir brother. They were even willing to say to them that I've got 2 wives, whichever one you want to marry, I'll divorce her, and after she finishes her iddah and waiting period, she could come and marry you. Now imagine that. Now obviously sometimes we could sacrifice our wealth, but very few people would be able to sacrifice their wife for their brother. But this is what the Ansar were willing to do. And it's not like the Ansar had 2 wives and he said, oh, there's one wife I don't like, she's a bit ugly, you could have her and so on. He actually gave the choice to the Muhajir brother and said, whichever wife you like. So naturally someone, insan, he's got this melanun nafs that you like someone who's pretty. So that Muhajir most likely would go for that wife who's most good looking, the most prettiest. So that Ansari Sahabi would have to divorce this particular wife, and he will have to stay with the wife who may not be that good looking as the first one. But he was willing to do that. Why? Because it was the command of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is what we call the Ansar fulfilling Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's command. And also number 2, this is what we call Islamic brotherhood, unity, Muslim brotherhood and ittihad. That you're willing to sacrifice your wealth and also your wives, those things which are the most beloved to you, you are willing to sacrifice that. Why? For unity, for ittihad and for Muslim brotherhood. And I mentioned this topic before, that when it comes to brotherhood, when it comes to ittihad, when it comes to ummah and togetherness, we look at one thing, and that one thing is Islam. We don't look at whether he does Ameen loudly or not, whether he does Raful Yadain, whether he says Ameen quietly, whether he does Masa on his leather socks or these kind of issues. The thing which we look at is Islam. And I mentioned before that ikhtilaf or differences of when it came to rulings or Quran and Hadith is not something which the jurists had, like Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi. But these ikhtilaf actually was there during the Sahabas and companions' time. And sometimes these ikhtilaf led to wars. Like if you look at the Battle of Camel, Jang-e Jamal, Jang-e Siffin. So these ikhtilaf, there was ikhtilaf between Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu and Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu for Jang-e Siffin. And for Jang-e Jamal, there was ikhtilaf between Hazrat Ali and Hazrat Aisha anha. So there was ikhtilaf, there was difference of opinion in terms of Hazrat Aisha anha, because obviously before Hazrat Usman anhu was martyred. So Hazrat Aisha anha and Hazrat Muawiyah anhu, they were thinking that Hazrat Ali being the Khalifa, he wasn't doing much to bring the killers of Hazrat Uthman anhu to justice. So what happened? There was actually a war between the Sahabas. So again, that was based on differences of opinions, ikhtilaf. So even though there was differences of opinion in that Battle of Camel, in the Battle of Siffin, one Sahabi did not do takfir of the other Sahabi. Na'udhu billah, that one Sahabi did not say to the other, oh, you're not Arab, you're not in the fold of Islam. So what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to brotherhood, there's only one thing which we look at, and that is Islam. There's no other things, there's nothing else which we look at, only one particular condition, one criteria, and that is Islam, and that is being a Muslim. That is sufficient to be considered within the Muslim Ummah and the Muslim Brotherhood. And with regards to ikhtilaf and Sahabas differing and so on, I'll just mention one hadith which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said. He said that ashabi kan nujum, that my companions, they are like stars in the skies. فَبِأَيِّهِمْ اِقْتَدَيْتُمْ اِهْتَدَيْتُمْ, which means that whichever Sahabi or companion you follow, you will be on the straight path. It's like, say for example, when there's millions of stars in the heavens, so we use the nur or the light of any star to then show us the direction. So similarly, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that whichever Sahabi's hidayat or guidance or nur which you follow, you will get to the right path, you will get guidance. And that's why we see that many of the groups or sects who have deviated away from the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, it started when they started saying bad things about the Sahabas and companions. When they start losing that respect and the azmat of the Sahabas, that's when they start going away from the Sunnah. That's when they start going away from the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and they start coming out with wacky and weird beliefs and so on. So as I was saying that, look at the Sahabas, look at the companions, look how together they were. Even though they themselves, the Ansar and the Muhajir, they did have some difference of opinions, but that did not stop them to have this kind of togetherness and ittihad. Now regarding this muakhat and this connection which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam established, once one of the Muhajirs, he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, "O Rasulullah, the Ansars, they are taking all the reward." Because look, the Ansar, they're giving their wealth, they're giving their wives, they're giving everything to us. So they are taking all the reward, they were taking all the thawab. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then said to the Muhajir that there is something which you, if you were to do it, you will be superior than them. So they then asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what is that? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied by saying, making dua for them. So when you make dua for them, you are actually doing something which is more superior than what they are doing. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself explained that whatever the Ansars have done for you, giving the wealth, giving the land, giving their wives, if you were to put it on one scale, and then you've got a few kalimas and a few words of duas for them, then that scale will outweigh the scale of what they have given to you. Because what they have given, wealth, wives, these are all worldly things. So when it comes to dua, which remember is always going to benefit you in the hereafter, benefit you in this world or the very least in the hereafter, that scale, the scale of dua, will always outweigh what they have done for you. And that's why it's mentioned in a hadith that whenever a beggar would come to Hazrat Aisha anha, now it's the adat of a beggar that whenever they come and ask you for something, they'll say, oh, give me something, I'll do dua for you. They'll always say that. They'll say, oh, give me £1 or give me £5, I'll do dua for you. So whenever a beggar would come to Hazrat Aisha Anha asking for some money, asking for some food, and they would say to Hazrat Aisha that I would do dua for you, what Hazrat Aisha Anha would do will be that she would firstly make dua for them, and then she will give them some money. So somebody asked Hazrat Aisha Anha that, why do you make dua for them? Why don't you just like give them that and just tell them to go? So Hazrat Aisha Anha said that, look, if I just give them something, just say I give them £1, and they make dua for me, they are doing something superior than what I am doing. So I want to do something superior than what they are doing. So what I do, they do dua, I do dua, and on top of that I give something extra, i.e. money or whatever charity or whatever food I have, so that my actions will be superior than what they have done. So what we can understand, obviously, this is like another topic, a separate topic. We talk about the importance of dua. So this is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught the muhajirs, that you could still compete with the Ansar. It's not like they've taken all the reward and thawab. The way you can compete is by making dua for them. Now this first year of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina Munawwara, so we mentioned that the first thing which happened was he established Masjid Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number two, as we just looked at, he established the connection between the Muhajirs and the Ansar. And another thing which happened in the first year of Hijrah and migration to Medina Munawwara was the inception and the beginning of the Adhan. Now initially, when namaz became obligatory in Makkah, there wasn't any Adhan. And even at the beginning, when they migrated to Medina Munawwara, there wasn't Adhan. Whenever there was Fajr time, whenever it was Zuhr time, the Sahabas would just assemble in the masjid and they would just pray the namaz. Now what happened was that slowly people were getting busy, and also the Muslim inhabitants of Medina Munawwara were slowly increasing. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did mashwara or advice with the Sahabas that what should I do? How should we call people towards namaz? So one mashwara was given is that we should use a bell, a naqus. We should chime the bell so people would know that namaz time has started. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam disagreed. He said that no, there's a form of imitation with the Christians. So then another Sahabi said that we should use a trumpet and make a noise, and then that will tell people to come to the masjid for namaz. So again Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam disagreed, and he said that no, there's similarities with the Jews, because that's how they call people towards their prayer in the synagogue, is by using a trumpet. Then another Sahabi suggested that we should light a fire outside so that people will know that namaz time has started. So again Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam refused by saying that no, this is similar to the Majusis, the fire worshippers, that they light fire to tell people that their prayer time has started. So eventually Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't agree with it, but he said that okay, we will now start using a bell to call people towards namaz. Now that particular night there was a Sahabi or a companion in the name of Abdullah bin Zayd bin Abdi Rabbihi. And this Sahabi and this companion, he saw a dream. There was a person, he was wearing green clothes, and he had a bell in his hand. So Abdullah bin Zayd bin Abdi Rabbihi, he approaches this person and he says, I want to buy this bell. So this person replied by saying, what do you want the bell for? So he said, I want to use this bell so that I can call people for namaz. So then this person in the dream says to Hazrat Abdullah bin Zayd bin Abdi Rabbihi that, shall I tell you something more better which you can use to call people for namaz? And then he started saying the azan. So he started saying the azan, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Shadu an la ilaha illallah, all the way until the end. And then this person, he then moved from his place, this person in the dream, he then moved from his place, and then he said the Iqamah, Allahu Akbar, a bit more quickly, all the way until the end. Now the next morning when Abdullah bin Zayd bin Abdi Rabbihi, when he woke up, he went to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, explained the dream. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told Abdullah bin Zayd bin Abdi Rabbihi that teach these words to Hazrat Bilal radiallahu anhu, and tell Hazrat Bilal to say the words. Why? Because his voice is a bit more louder than yours. So then Hazrat Bilal radiallahu anhu started saying the azan, And then it's mentioned that Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, when he heard these words, he then quickly rushed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that by Allah, I also saw the same dream as well. Now let's look at azan. You know, azan, sometimes we just hear it and just like it goes through one ear, then it comes out of the other. Let's analyze azan. Now when we look at azan, there are three parts of azan. The first part explains about Tawheed. Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest. And then afterwards, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And then the second part of the azan talks about Risalat. Ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah. And then the third part of the azan, Hayya ala salah, Hayya ala salah, Hayya al falah, Hayya al falah, talks about namaz, talks about success, talks about the greatest ibadats out of all the ibadats and worship, i.e. namaz and praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the unique thing about azan is that whenever azan is called, it's a form of da'wah, it's a form of reminder for the Muslims about the three basic tenets in our belief: Tawheed, Risalat and namaz. We listen to azan and it comes out from the other ear, but actually that's not the maqsad of azan. The maqsad and the aim of azan is to contemplate over the words, is a reminder all the time to believe in the oneness of Allah, number two, to believe in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and number three, to believe or to pray and to act upon the greatest ibadat, i.e. namaz and salah. And that's one of the reasons why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam chose azan over, say, chiming of the bell, because chiming of the bell is just like a sound. You don't get any message from it. But azan, not only is he inviting people for namaz, there's also a message to it. But unfortunately what's happened is that our azan nowadays have become similar to the chiming of the bell. It just become like another sound. We just see somebody doing azan, we don't get just azan. We either sometimes doing our own work or we just talking to someone. We don't actually value the azan. Even though the jurists have said that it's mustahab to reply to the azan, but what we should do is that whenever the azan is given, we should be quiet and we should contemplate over the message. Because if we're not contemplating over the message and thinking about the message, then what's the difference between the azan which we give and the chiming of the bell? Same way chiming of a bell is just like a sound. Then if we are not contemplating over the words of the words of the azan have also become like a sound as well. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has chosen this particular way of calling people towards namaz. And not only is he a call and an invite to namaz, but it's also a source of reminder, a source of tazkir, a source of da'wah even for non-Muslims, of tawheed, risalat, and obviously success in this world and the hereafter, are you making sure that we are punctual with our namaz. And because the words, one final point, because the words of azan is ba-barakat, because it's got Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name, that's why it is considered a sunnah and recommended that whenever a child is born, the very first thing we say to this child is the azan. Azan in the right ear of the child and iqamat in the left ear of the child. May Allah give us tawfiq to act as we said. Wa